She gets nothing, he said, at her funeral. Right there, beside her casket, in front of everyone. My own father announced I was cut out of Grandma's will. But it got worse. The very next morning, he sold her house, my childhood home, and included every memory inside. Her dishes, her garden, even the wind chimes we hung together. When I tried to step inside, a real estate agent shoved me off the porch. "You're trespassing," she said. I stood there shaking, humiliated, until I remembered something Dad forgot. Grandma never did anything without leaving a paper trail. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Rachel Marin Whitlock, and I'm 35 years old. I work as an administrative assistant at Parker & Mills while spending my weekends caring for my grandmother, Edie Whitlock, the woman who practically raised me. My father, Warren Douglas Whitlock, drops by her house only when money matters arise. His crisp business shirts and practiced smile a sure sign of incoming tension. I've watched him dismiss my years of dedication with a wave of his manicured hand, my shoulders tensing each time he steps through Grandma's door. The smell of Grandma's lavender hand cream lingers as she asks me, more frequently now, about where she keeps her important documents. My stomach tightens when she brings it up, but I don't press. I've learned that sometimes staying quiet means seeing more clearly. But let me start from the beginning. Have you ever felt your world tilt sideways in slow motion? That's what happened at Grandma Edie's funeral. The late October wind rustled through the cemetery's maple trees, scattering red-gold leaves across the rows of granite markers. I stood there in my black dress, the one Grandma helped me pick out last Christmas, trying to hold myself together while relatives I barely knew patted my arm and murmured practiced sympathies. "She's in a better place now," my second cousin Janet whispered, her perfume too sharp, too intrusive for this sacred moment. I managed a weak nod, my throat too tight for words. The memory of Grandma's last morning still played on repeat in my head. The way she'd squeezed my hand, how her silver hair caught the sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. I'd been there every day, watching her fade like a photograph left too long in the sun. But Dad? He'd visited maybe 3 times in those final months, always with some excuse about meetings or business trips. Now he stood at the front of the gathering next to Pastor Matthews, in a crisp charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, hovered nearby like a well-dressed shadow. I should have known something was wrong right then. Dad cleared his throat, and the quiet murmurs of the mourners died away. "Before we conclude the service," he announced, his voice carrying across the cemetery with practiced authority, "I need to address something. There have been questions about Mom's estate." He paused, and I felt my chest tighten. "My daughter gets nothing. That was Mom's wish." The words hit me like ice water. My knees went weak, and I grabbed the back of a nearby folding chair to steady myself. The crowd's reaction was almost worse. Not surprise, but knowing glances and slight nods, as if this made perfect sense to everyone but me. You know that feeling when you're having a nightmare, but you can't seem to wake up? That's what the next few minutes felt like. People began dispersing, their shoes crunching on fallen leaves while I stood frozen in place. Through the fog of shock, I watched Dad shake hands with the pastor, then turn toward his car without so much as a glance in my direction. "Dad," I called out, my voice cracking. I hurried after him, my heels sinking into the damp earth. "What do you mean? That can't be right." He turned slowly, his face a mask of practiced patience. "Rachel, this isn't the time or place for a scene." "A scene?" My hands were shaking. "I took care of her. I was there every weekend, every holiday. I helped her with her medications, her doctor's appointments." "Which was your choice," he cut in smoothly. "No one forced you to do that." His lawyer stepped between us, all business. "Miss Whitlock, any questions about the estate should go through proper legal channels. We'll be in touch." And just like that, they were gone, leaving me alone among the tombstones with the echo of Dad's announcement ringing in my ears. The same ears that had listened to countless stories of Grandma's teaching days, that had heard her laugh at old photos, that had caught her whispered, "I love you, sweetheart," just days before the end. That night, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, unable to sleep. The scent of Grandma's rose garden still clung to my funeral clothes, and I couldn't bring myself to change. "Remember how she taught me to prune those bushes?" "Always cut at an angle, Rachel," she'd say, demonstrating with her silver shears. "Give the new growth room to breathe." My phone buzzed with a text at 7 a.m. It was Mrs. Keeley from next door. Rachel, there are people emptying out your grandmother's house. Moving trucks. Is everything okay? I threw on clothes and drove across town, my heart hammering. But by the time I pulled up to the familiar white colonial with its wraparound porch, a sold sign was already staked in the front yard. A real estate agent in a red blazer stood on the steps, directing movers who carried out pieces of my childhood. Grandma's antique writing desk, her favorite reading chair, the grandfather clock that had chimed through every Christmas morning I could remember. When I tried to go inside, the agent blocked my path. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "The property is under contract. No unauthorized persons allowed." I stared at the real estate agent, my mouth going dry. There must be some mistake. This is my grandmother's house. She just passed away yesterday. "I have my instructions," she said, positioning herself more firmly in the doorway. Her red blazer was the exact shade of a stop sign. "Only authorized personnel until the closing is complete." "But her things?" My voice cracked. "Those are family heirlooms in there." She consulted her tablet with mechanical efficiency. "According to my paperwork, all contents were included in the sale. The executor has signed off on everything." The executor. My father. Of course. Through the open door, I watched two burly movers wrestle with Grandma's china cabinet, the one where she'd kept her prized collection of Depression glass. Each piece had a story. The pink candy dish from her first teaching job, the amber pitcher her mother brought from Ireland. The cabinet tilted dangerously as they maneuvered it down the hallway. "Please be careful with that," I called out, taking an instinctive step forward. The agent's manicured hand shot out. "Ma'am, I'll have to ask you to leave the property." "Leave the—" I choked on the words. "I practically grew up in this house. I have a key, which you no longer have authorization to use." She was already reaching for her phone. "Don't make me call the authorities." My cheeks burned as neighbors peered from their windows. Mrs. Keeley stood on her porch next door, wringing her hands. I'd babysat her grandkids in that house, helped Grandma host her garden club meetings there, learned to bake snickerdoodles in that kitchen, standing on a step stool while Grandma showed me how to roll the dough in cinnamon sugar. Now I was being treated like a trespasser. I stumbled back down the porch steps, legs shaking. The movers kept working, boxing up photo albums and table lamps, pieces of my history vanishing into cardboard containers. My phone was in my hand before I realized I'd pulled it out. Dad answered on the fourth ring. "Rachel, I'm in a meeting." "There are people emptying out Grandma's house," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "They won't let me inside. I need to see the will." "It's been taken care of." His tone was dismissive, like I was a child asking silly questions. "Taken care of?" "Dad, those are Grandma's things, our family memories. You can't just—" "I can and I have. The estate has been settled according to Mom's wishes." A pause. "I thought I made that clear at the service. But I don't understand why—" "I have to go. My clients are waiting." The line went dead. I sat in my car for almost an hour, watching the movers work. Each trip they made felt like another piece of my grandmother disappearing. The brass wind chimes she hung every spring, her collection of well-worn cookbooks, the patchwork quilt she'd sewn while recovering from hip surgery. The sun was setting by the time the trucks pulled away. I couldn't bear to watch them go. Instead, I found myself knocking on Mrs. Keeley's door. She answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting for me. Her silver bob caught the last rays of daylight as she ushered me inside. "Oh, Rachel," she said softly. "I've been so worried. Come sit down. I'll make us some tea." The familiar scent of Earl Grey filled her cozy living room. How many afternoons had Grandma and I spent here, sharing cookies and conversation with her oldest friend? Mrs. Keeley's hands trembled slightly as she poured, spilling a few drops onto the saucer. "There's something you should know," she said, setting down the teapot. She disappeared into her study and returned with a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this. She made me promise to wait until something like this happened." My hands shook as Mrs. Keeley pressed the envelope into them. The paper felt thin, fragile, like autumn leaves ready to crumble. For a moment, I just stared at my name written in Grandma's familiar cursive, remembering how she'd taught me penmanship at her kitchen table, guiding my small hand as I practiced loops and curves. "She came to me about 3 weeks before—" Mrs. Keeley's voice trailed off. She twisted the silver wedding band she still wore. Said she needed someone she could trust, someone outside the family. The seal broke with a soft tear. 2 items slipped out, a folded letter and what looked like a legal document. I opened the letter first, my heart clenching at the sight of Grandma's handwriting. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, things haven't gone as I hoped. I've watched you grow into such a beautiful soul, always putting others first, never asking for recognition. You were there when I needed you most, while others only showed up when it suited them. I'm not blind to how your father treats you. I've seen the hurt in your eyes when he dismisses your sacrifices. That's why I changed my will. The house and everything in it should go to the person who truly cherished it, and me. Don't let anyone tell you that you deserve less. Fight for what's right, sweetheart. I've left proof with my dear friend Betty. All my love, Grandma. My vision blurred. Mrs. Keeley quietly handed me a tissue as I unfolded the second document, a photocopy of a will. The legal language swam before my eyes until I found the key passage. Hereby revoke all prior wills and codicils. Leave all property, real and personal, to my granddaughter, Rachel Marin Whitlock. The date jumped out at me. 3 months after the will Dad had used. My pulse roared in my ears. There's something else you should know, Mrs. Keeley said, her voice gentle but urgent. I overheard Warren talking to that real estate agent yesterday. They've already accepted an offer. My head snapped up. What? She nodded toward the window. Through the gauzy curtains, I could see the for sale sign in front of Grandma's house. But now there was something new attached. A bright red banner declaring, sale pending, closing in 10 days. 10 days? The words came out as a whisper. That's all I have? I'm so sorry, dear. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I promised Edie I'd wait until... She gestured at the envelope. Well, until you had proof in your hands. My mind raced. The house would transfer to new owners in less than 2 weeks. After that, what chance would I have? All those memories, Grandma's treasures, her garden where we'd spent countless summer afternoons, gone forever. I need a lawyer, I said, more to myself than Mrs. Keeley. Someone who knows about contesting wills. Mrs. Keeley squeezed my hand. Use my computer, dear. It's in the study. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Will dispute lawyers, contesting probate, inheritance law, page after page of results. Some looked promising, others predatory. I scribbled down numbers, trying to focus through the fog of shock and anger. One firm's website caught my eye. They specialized in estate litigation, offered free consultations, and had an after-hours emergency line. The clock on Mrs. Keeley's desk showed 11:47 p.m. My hand hovered over my phone. Don't wait, Mrs. Keeley said from the doorway, as if reading my thoughts. Edie wouldn't want you to wait. I took a deep breath and dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. Brennan Legal Services, after-hours line. My name is Rachel Whitlock, I said, gripping the photocopy of the will. And I need help stopping a house sale. I have evidence of a suppressed will. The law office looked exactly like you'd expect. Wood paneling, leather chairs, and that distinct smell of paper and ambition. Attorney Sarah Brennan studied the photocopied will through wire-rimmed glasses, her expression carefully neutral. The good news? She set down the document. This appears legitimate. The signature matches your grandmother's known style, and the witnessing details are thorough. I leaned forward. And the bad news? Filing an emergency injunction to stop the sale will cost around $8,000. She held up a hand as my face fell. That's just to start. If this goes to full litigation, I have about $6,000 in savings, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. And maybe $4,000 available on credit cards. Remember when you were a kid, and money seemed like this magical thing adults just had? That innocent belief felt very far away as I signed the retainer agreement, my hand shaking slightly. The credit card authorization made my stomach clench. I'd never maxed one out before. We'll file first thing tomorrow, Sarah said. The sooner we... My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Stop this nonsense immediately. You're embarrassing yourself. I showed it to Sarah, who frowned. How did he know already? Small town, I said. Probably saw me coming in here. The next morning, I woke to an email from Dad's lawyer. They were countersuing for harassment and filing sanctions against me for submitting fraudulent documents. The amount they were demanding made my head spin. "You don't have standing," my father's voice boomed through the courthouse hallway 3 days later. I turned to find him striding toward me, Heather trailing behind him like an eager puppy. "You're not even named in the valid will." "The valid will?" My voice cracked. "You mean the one you rushed to file before anyone could ask questions?" His face darkened. "Watch yourself." Inside the courtroom, things got worse. Sarah presented our case clearly: the new will, Grandma's letter, Mrs. Keeley's statement. But then Heather took the stand, perfectly coiffed in a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Rachel was always hovering," Heather said, her voice dripping with concern, "isolating Aunt Edie from the rest of us, suggesting she change her financial arrangements." My jaw dropped. I hadn't even seen Heather at the house in over a year. "Can you be more specific?" Dad's lawyer prompted. "Well," Heather dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, "the last time I visited, Aunt Edie seemed confused about her medications. Rachel insisted on being the only one to handle them. She got very aggressive when I offered to help." "That's a lie," I whispered to Sarah. "She never—" "Order," the judge warned, glancing my way. "And did you witness any concerning behavior regarding financial matters?" Dad's lawyer continued. Heather nodded solemnly. "Rachel was always bringing papers for Aunt Edie to sign. Banking forms, I think. When I asked about them, Rachel would get defensive and wait until I left." My chest felt too tight. Those were prescription refill authorizations, nothing more. "Your Honor," Sarah stood, "this witness hasn't produced any evidence. The court will review all submitted materials," the judge cut in. "Given the serious nature of these allegations, we'll need time to examine both wills and investigate claims of undue influence. Proceedings are suspended for 30 days. The gavel crack felt like a physical blow. Outside, reporters clustered around Dad and Heather. I caught fragments. "Troubled daughter. Financial difficulties. Protecting mother's wishes." That evening, I trudged up to my apartment, exhausted. A white notice was taped to my door. My hands trembled as I read it. "Final warning, past due rent." I sank onto my couch, surrounded by legal papers I could barely understand anymore. The savings account I'd drained, the maxed-out credit card, the stack of bills marked urgent. You know that moment when you realize you might have made a terrible mistake? When doubt creeps in like poison? I stared at my phone. Dad's number still stored under family. One call admitting defeat, and maybe this would all go away. But then I remembered Grandma's letter. "Don't let anyone tell you that you deserve less." My phone buzzed. Another text from Dad. "Ready to drop this foolishness?" It's not too late to apologize. I turned the phone face down without responding. The sun was setting outside my window, casting long shadows across the eviction notice on my coffee table. In just a few weeks, I'd lost my grandmother, my savings, and now possibly my home, all because I dared to stand up for the truth. I spent that night in my car, parked behind the 24-hour laundromat. The seats weren't made for sleeping, but I couldn't face my apartment, or that eviction notice, for one more second. My phone battery died hours ago, probably for the best. I couldn't handle another smug text from Dad or concerned voicemail from Sarah asking about our next move. You ever notice how shame feels heavier at night? How it sits on your chest like a concrete block, making each breath a little harder than the last? The autumn chill crept through my windows, and I pulled my jacket tighter. A memory flickered. Grandma wrapping her favorite quilt around my shoulders during thunderstorms, the scent of chamomile tea and lavender hand cream warming the air. Now that quilt was probably stuffed in some box, waiting to be sold off with everything else. Around 3 a.m., a police cruiser rolled through the parking lot, its spotlight sweeping past my windows. I ducked lower in my seat, feeling like a teenager breaking curfew instead of a 35-year-old professional. What would my coworkers think if they saw me now? That's when it hit me. The safe. Grandma's old gunmetal gray safe, always tucked in the back corner of her bedroom closet. She never told anyone the combination, but I used to watch her open it sometimes, usually late at night when she thought I was sleeping. The way she'd carefully lift out papers, study them under her reading lamp, then return everything precisely as it was. Dad hadn't mentioned the safe during the property clearance, not once. I sat up straight, my heart suddenly racing. The house's contents had to go somewhere before the sale. Even Dad wouldn't be stupid enough to throw out a locked safe. I grabbed my dead phone and portable charger, plugging it in with trembling fingers. As soon as it had enough juice, I pulled up Google Maps and started searching for storage facilities within 20 miles of Grandma's house. There were 8. The first 5 calls went nowhere. Sorry, ma'am, we can't disclose customer information. Click. The 6th facility had a night clerk who barely spoke English. The 7th was permanently closed. The 8th, a small family-owned place called Wilson's Storage, had a chatty receptionist named Judy who actually listened when I explained I was trying to track down some of my late grandmother's belongings. Oh, honey, that's such a shame about your grandma, Judy said. Let me check our system. Whitlock, you said? Wait, Warren Whitlock? My pulse spiked. Yes, that's my father. He rented Unit 147 about 2 weeks ago. Paid cash for 3 months up front. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, trying to keep my voice steady. That sounds right. He asked me to check on something but didn't give me the unit number. Would I be able to access it? Well, Judy hesitated. Technically, only the name on the rental agreement can enter, but if you have ID showing your family, I can bring my driver's license, I said quickly. And my birth certificate. Come by tomorrow morning. I'll be here until noon. I hung up and stared at my phone, hardly daring to breathe. Dad had cleared out Grandma's house in such a rush. Was it possible he'd overlooked something in that safe? Something important enough to prove I wasn't crazy or desperate or manipulative? The sun was rising now, painting the laundromat parking lot in shades of pink and gold. I started my car, checking Google Maps for the nearest coffee shop. I had 6 hours until Wilson's Storage opened, and I needed to look presentable enough that Judy wouldn't think twice about letting me in. My hands shook slightly as I pulled onto the main road. Maybe this was just another dead end. Maybe I was grasping at straws, burning through the last of my resources on a wild hunch. But something in my gut told me that safe mattered. Grandma had always been methodical, careful with her paperwork. She wouldn't have left things unfinished. I thought about what Heather said in court, about me hovering, being controlling. The truth was, I stayed close to Grandma because she asked me to. Because sometimes, late at night, she'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "You're the only one who really sees me, Rachel." The coffee shop's neon open sign flickered ahead. I pulled into the lot, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, hair a mess from sleeping in the car. But underneath the exhaustion, I saw something else. A spark of determination I thought I'd lost. I grabbed my purse and stepped out into the morning air. 6 hours. Whatever was in that safe, I was going to find out. Unit 147 was at the far end of the storage facility, tucked between rows of identical metal doors. Judy had barely glanced at my ID before handing over the key, chattering about her own grandmother's estate drama. I'd nodded politely, but my mind was already here, imagining what I might find. The lock clicked open. I lifted the rolling door, wincing at its rusty screech. Dusty sunlight filtered in, revealing a jumbled maze of Grandma's furniture. Her antique bedroom set, the kitchen table where we'd played countless card games, stacks of boxes labeled in Dad's precise handwriting. My throat tightened at the sight of her old rocking chair, now draped with a dirty sheet. The same chair where she'd sit every evening, teaching me to knit with endless patience while the smell of her honey chamomile tea filled the air. Focus, Rachel. I clicked on my phone's flashlight and started searching. The safe had to be here somewhere. 20 minutes of careful shifting revealed nothing but more furniture and boxes. Sweat trickled down my back as I pushed deeper into the unit. Then I spotted it, a glimpse of gunmetal gray beneath an old bed frame. My heart jumped. "Please," I whispered, tugging at the heavy metal frame. It wouldn't budge. I tried again, straining until my muscles screamed. Still nothing. You know what? Sometimes being the quiet one means people underestimate you. I planted my feet, took a deep breath, and heaved with everything I had. The bed frame scraped across concrete with an unholy shriek. There it was, Grandma's safe, dusty but intact. I pulled the bolt cutters from my bag, hands trembling. Was I really about to destroy my grandmother's property on a desperate hunch? The thought of Dad's smug face in court made my decision easier. I positioned the cutters and squeezed. The lock resisted at first, then gave way with a sharp snap that echoed through the unit. I quickly glanced over my shoulder, but the storage facility remained quiet. Inside the safe, the air smelled like old paper and metal. My fingers brushed something solid, a manila envelope thick with documents. I pulled it out, heart pounding as I read the cover sheet. Last Will and Testament of Edith Margot Whitlock. The date matched the copy Mrs. Keeley gave me. But this wasn't a photocopy. It was the original, complete with blue ink signatures and an official notary seal. I flipped through carefully, confirming every page was there. Something else caught my eye. A small cassette player. The kind Grandma used to record her thoughts when arthritis made writing too painful. A single tape sat inside, labeled in her shaky handwriting, Edie, Final Wishes. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I pressed play, holding my breath. Static crackled, then, Rachel, sweetheart. Grandma's voice, thin but clear. If you're hearing this, I'm gone and things haven't gone the way they should. I slid down against the storage unit wall, tears already blurring my vision. I'm changing my will today. Warren. She paused, and I heard the weight of decades in that silence. Warren stopped visiting months ago, stopped calling. But you, Rachel? You've been here every weekend, every holiday, making sure I had my medicine, bringing me books, just being present. She coughed, and I could picture her adjusting her reading glasses, gathering her thoughts. The house should go to you. You're the only one who truly loved it, loved me without conditions. Warren will be angry. He'll probably try to fight it. But I'm of sound mind, and this is my choice. The tape continued for another minute, Grandma's voice growing stronger as she detailed her reasons. I sat there crying, clutching the player like a lifeline. When it ended, I immediately called my attorney. Linda, I found something. Two somethings, actually. I explained about the will and the recording. The line went quiet. Finally, Linda spoke. The will is crucial. That alone could turn things around. The recording, she hesitated. It's compelling, but courts can be funny about audio evidence, especially this late in proceedings. But we can try? I'll file a motion first thing tomorrow. But Rachel, her voice softened, be prepared for your father to fight this. Hard. I looked at the cassette player in my lap, then at the original will beside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. Let him try. The next morning, Linda's voice crackled through my phone speaker. Rachel, we've hit a wall. Your father's lawyers filed an emergency motion to block both pieces of evidence. My stomach dropped. Can they do that? They're arguing the will wasn't properly stored with the court, and the audio... She sighed. They're calling it unreliable hearsay. Without context for chain of custody, the judge might agree. I paced my tiny apartment, the walls seeming to close in. But it's her voice, her actual words. I know, but legally that may not be enough. Your father's team is pushing hard to get this wrapped up before the house sale closes. Through my window, I watched a delivery truck rumble past. The same kind that had emptied Grandma's house while I stood helpless on the porch. My throat tightened. What about public opinion? I asked. Everyone in town knew how much I helped Grandma. That's actually gotten complicated. Linda's tone made me freeze. Your father gave an interview to the Cedar Grove Gazette yesterday. He's spinning this as you trying to cash in on your grandmother's death. I grabbed my laptop, fingers trembling as I pulled up the local news site. There it was. Grieving father speaks out. My daughter's claims dishonor mother's memory. The photo showed Dad looking appropriately somber in his best suit, standing in front of the town hall where he served on the planning board. You know that feeling when anger goes beyond hot and turns ice cold? That's where I was. He's quoted saying you've been financially unstable for years, Linda continued. That you pressured your grandmother when she was vulnerable. I thought of the cassette in my bag. Grandma's voice, so clear and certain, explaining exactly why she'd changed her will. If only people could hear it. Wait. Linda, what about the media? If we release the recording... Absolutely not, she cut in. That could prejudice the case. As your attorney, I can't advise... What if someone else released it? Silence stretched between us. Finally, Linda spoke carefully. I cannot be part of that conversation, but hypothetically, once something's public, it's public. I hung up and immediately Googled Cedar Grove Gazette investigative reporters. A name jumped out. Melissa Chen. She'd done a series last year exposing elder abuse at a local nursing home. Her stories had actual impact. The facility was shut down. Reforms were passed. I found her email and composed a message. Re Warren Whitlock estate dispute. Evidence of will suppression. Short, professional, just the facts. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Her response came within an hour. Interesting. Coffee. Murphy's Diner, 7 p.m. The rest of the day crawled by. I changed outfits 3 times, wanting to look credible but not desperate. At 6:45, I walked into Murphy's, the cassette player feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my purse. Melissa was already there, tucked into a back booth. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, no notebook in sight. Smart, less conspicuous that way. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, sliding into the booth. She studied me over her coffee cup. "Your email was intriguing, but I need to be clear. I'm not here to be a weapon in a family feud. I understand. I kept my voice steady. I'm here because the truth matters, because sometimes the legal system isn't enough. Tell me." I laid it out. The funeral announcement, the rushed house sale, finding the safe. Her expression stayed neutral, but she took notes on her phone. "And you have proof?" she asked when I finished. I pulled out the cassette player. Her own words, explaining exactly why she changed her will. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Most people under 40 don't even know what these are anymore. Grandma was old school. She trusted things she could hold. She picked up the player, turned it over in her hands. "Mind if I listen?" I nodded. She put in her earbuds, pressed play. I watched her face as Grandma's voice filled her ears. 2 minutes in, she started taking more notes. 4 minutes. Her eyes narrowed. By the end, she was sitting straighter. She pulled out her earbuds. "This is compelling. Will you run the story?" "I need to verify some things first, and I'll have to reach out to your father for comment. Standard procedure." My heart hammered. This was it. No turning back. "I understand." She carefully placed the player in her bag. "I'll be in touch within 48 hours. I walked home through the cooling evening air, wondering if I'd just made things better or infinitely worse. But sitting quiet, playing by the rules, that hadn't worked. Sometimes you have to risk everything to get what's right. The headline hit at 6 a.m. Granddaughter fights to honor. Grandma's final wish. Exclusive audio reveals truth behind contested will. I nearly dropped my phone, hands shaking as I scrolled through Melissa's article. She'd done more than just share the recording. She'd dug deep, interviewing former neighbors, tracking down hospital staff who'd witnessed Dad's rare visits, even finding old records of property tax payments I'd made on Grandma's behalf. Have you ever watched a truth you've carried alone suddenly burst into the light? It's terrifying and liberating all at once. By noon, the story had gone viral. Local news picked it up first, then regional stations. My phone buzzed constantly with message notifications from strangers. "Stay strong. We're with you." This happened to my family too. I remembered how alone I'd felt standing on that funeral home steps, watching everyone avoid my eyes. Now thousands of people were sharing their own stories of family betrayal and elder exploitation. The comments section under Melissa's article grew into a tsunami of support. "Listen to her voice," one comment read, referring to the short audio clip the paper had released. "That's not a confused woman being manipulated. That's a grandmother making sure her love isn't erased." The scent of coffee and toast suddenly brought me back to Grandma's kitchen, where she'd taught me that doing right mattered more than being liked. I wondered what she'd think of all this attention. Dad's carefully constructed public image began cracking within hours. Someone dug up old planning board meetings where he'd pushed through controversial development deals. Former business associates started talking. By evening, his law firm, Morgan, Chase & Whitman, issued a terse statement. "In light of recent revelations, our firm will no longer represent Warren Whitlock in the estate matter of Edith Whitlock. We wish all parties a swift resolution." My cousin Heather, who'd testified so confidently about my manipulation of Grandma, deleted her social media accounts and stopped answering calls. The last post anyone saw from her was a cryptic, "The truth is complicated." Yeah, perjury usually is. 3 days into the media storm, my phone rang. Linda, my attorney, sounded breathless. "Rachel, check your email. The judge has ordered an emergency hearing. Everyone must appear in person. Your father, Heather, the notary who witnessed the original will, everyone." I sat down hard on my worn couch. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp." She paused. "This is good, Rachel. The judge wouldn't rush this if she wasn't taking the new evidence seriously." That night, I barely slept. I laid out my most professional outfit, the charcoal pencil skirt and cream blouse I'd worn to my last job interview. Simple pearl earrings Grandma had given me for my 30th birthday. No makeup could hide the dark circles under my eyes, but maybe they'd show how hard this fight had been. The courthouse steps were crawling with reporters when I arrived. Camera flashes burst like lightning as I walked up, Linda steady beside me. Someone shouted, "Rachel, how does it feel to finally be heard?" I kept walking, chin up, through the security checkpoint, past the bustling corridor where my father had once smugly dismissed my claims, into the familiar courtroom that had earlier seemed so overwhelming. Dad was already there, sitting alone at the defense table. No fancy law firm behind him now. His shoulders, usually so rigid with authority, sagged slightly. He didn't turn when I entered. Heather slipped in moments before 9, taking a seat in the back row. She looked smaller somehow, her previous confidence evaporated. When our eyes met briefly, she quickly looked away. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise," the Honorable Judge Marina Santos presiding. The judge settled into her chair, surveying the packed courtroom. Her gaze lingered on the media section, then moved to the stack of documents before her. On top was a newspaper, Melissa's story clearly visible. "Before we begin," Judge Santos said, her voice cutting through the tension, "I want to address the considerable public attention this case has received. While the court appreciates society's interest in justice, we will proceed based on evidence and law alone." She lifted the cassette player. "And it seems we have quite a bit of new evidence to examine." I gripped the edge of my chair, heart pounding. The moment Grandma had prepared for, had trusted me to see through, was finally here. No more hiding, no more dismissals, just truth, plain and clear as her voice on that tape. The judge looked directly at me, then at my father. "Let's begin." The bailiff placed the cassette player on the judge's bench. My throat tightened as she pressed play, and Grandma's voice filled the courtroom, frailer than I remembered, but still carrying that gentle strength I'd known all my life. "This is Edith Marie Whitlock, recording my final wishes on March 15th, 2022. A pause, then a soft cough. "I'm making this recording because I need everyone to understand why I'm changing my will. My granddaughter, Rachel, she's been here every weekend, making sure I take my medications, bringing me to doctor's appointments, just sitting with me when the days get long. You could hear paper rustling in the background. Warren, my son, he visits when money needs discussing. Last month, he tried convincing me to sell the house, said a retirement community would be better. But Rachel, she's the one who made it possible for me to stay home. She's the one who deserves this house. Not because she expects it, but because she never asked for anything except to help." I glanced at Dad. His jaw clenched as Grandma detailed his absence during her hospital stays, his dismissal of her wishes to age in place, his constant pressure about the estate. The recording ran for 12 minutes. Not a single person in the courtroom moved. When it ended, Judge Santos held up the notarized will found in the safe. "This document meets all legal requirements. Properly witnessed, properly executed." She turned to my father. "Mr. Whitlock, you were aware of this will's existence?" Dad stood slowly. "Your Honor, A simple yes or no." His shoulders stiffened. "Yes. And you deliberately suppressed it during probate proceedings?" "I believed it was executed under duress." Judge Santos cut him off. "That's not what I asked. You knowingly withheld a legal document from this court. Moreover, you filed a will you knew had been superseded." She shuffled through some papers. "You also encouraged false testimony. Ms. Heather Whitlock, please approach." My cousin's heels clicked against the floor as she walked forward. Gone was the confident woman who'd testified about my manipulation of Grandma. Now she couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "Ms. Whitlock," the judge said, "your previous testimony claimed you witnessed the plaintiff pressuring Mrs. Edith Whitlock to change her will. Yet this recording clearly states otherwise. Would you like to revise your statement?" Heather's hands trembled. Uncle Warren said, "Choose your next words carefully. Perjury carries serious consequences. He told me Rachel was trying to steal everything." Heather's voice cracked. "Said if I helped him, he'd make sure I got part of the estate. I never actually saw—" She stopped, looking desperately at my father. Judge Santos's pen scratched across her notepad. "I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." She glanced at the bailiff. "Please escort Ms. Whitlock to the clerk's office for processing." As Heather was led out, Linda stood. "Your Honor, given the evidence and testimony, we rest our case." The judge nodded, then fixed my father with a stern look. Mr. Whitlock, you've abused this court's process, damaged your daughter's reputation, and very nearly succeeded in subverting your own mother's final wishes. Before I rule, she forged it. Dad suddenly shot to his feet, his face red. Rachel must have forced Mom to make that recording. She was always manipulating her, playing the devoted granddaughter while plotting to take everything. I demand a handwriting analysis, voice authentication. Remember that autumn afternoon when Grandma taught me to make her special apple pie? The way she'd say, "Patience, Rachel. Good things take time, but truth rises like cream." Sitting in that courtroom watching Dad's desperate final grab, I finally understood what she meant. The judge's gavel cracked sharply. "Mr. Whitlock, sit down. Your accusations are both unfounded and, given the evidence, borderline contemptuous. If you continue, I have proof." Dad reached into his briefcase, hands shaking. Documents showing Rachel's financial troubles, her desperate need for money. She couldn't even keep her job at... The gavel slammed again. "One more word, Mr. Whitlock, and you'll be joining your niece at the clerk's office. Now sit down." I watched Dad sink into his chair, deflated. His perfect facade had finally cracked. Judge Santos shuffled through the documents one last time, her expression stern. "Mr. Whitlock, your allegation that this evidence was planted is particularly troubling." She held up a paper. "I have here the storage facility's rental agreement signed by you on March 15th. The unit was paid for with your credit card. The security footage shows you personally moving items there 3 days after Mrs. Whitlock's passing." My father's face went ash gray. Linda, my attorney, leaned forward. "Your Honor, if I may, we also have testimony from the facility manager confirming Mr. Whitlock's multiple visits." "Indeed." Judge Santos turned to Dad. "Mr. Whitlock, would you care to explain this discrepancy?" Dad cleared his throat. "I may have forgotten about the storage unit in the stress of the moment." His voice had lost its usual authority. "There were so many arrangements to make after Mother's death. So you're now testifying, under oath, that you forgot about a storage unit containing your mother's personal safe?" The judge's tone could have frozen water. "The same safe that, coincidentally, held the will you claimed didn't exist." "Your Honor, A simple yes or no, Mr. Whitlock." He swallowed hard. "Yes." The courtroom fell silent. I could hear the ancient wall clock ticking, marking each second of my father's undoing. The scent of lemon polish from the wooden benches reminded me of Grandma's furniture, how she'd taught me to care for nice things, to preserve what mattered. Judge Santos straightened her papers. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court finds the will dated September 12th to be valid and binding." She paused, looking directly at me. "Ms. Rachel Whitlock is hereby confirmed as sole heir to Edith Whitlock's estate, including all real property and assets." My eyes welled up. Linda squeezed my hand. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "given Mr. Warren Whitlock's deliberate suppression of evidence and abuse of process, he is permanently barred from any claim to the estate." She turned to the bailiff. "Please ensure Ms. Heather Whitlock is processed for perjury charges before release." The gavel struck. "This court's ruling is final. We're adjourned." The room erupted in movement. Reporters rushed for the doors. My father's new attorney whispered urgently in his ear, and Linda beamed at me. "We did it, Rachel. The house is yours." I stood on shaky legs, gathering my purse. Dad brushed past without looking at me, his shoulders rigid with defeat. Part of me wanted to say something. What? I wasn't sure. But he was already gone, leaving behind only the ghost of his cologne and 35 years of disappointment. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine warmed my face. Camera flashes popped. Someone thrust a microphone toward me. Linda deftly steered me through the crowd, down the stone steps I'd climbed so many times during this fight. Each step felt lighter than the last. At the bottom, I stopped. The victory I'd fought so hard for suddenly felt enormous, overwhelming. The house was mine, Grandma's house with its creaky third stair and rose garden and wind chimes that played her favorite melody. But what now? All these months I'd been focused on the fight, on proving Dad wrong, on honoring Grandma's wishes. Linda touched my arm. "Rachel? Are you okay?" I stared at the courthouse columns, thinking of Grandma's voice on that tape, of her faith in me, of all the quiet moments we'd shared that Dad never understood. My hands stopped trembling. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I'm okay. The truth was, I didn't need to know what came next. Not right this second. I'd fought for justice and I'd won. The rest, well, like Grandma always said about her garden, good things take time to grow. I stepped onto the sidewalk, leaving behind the cameras and questions. The spring breeze carried the scent of blooming dogwoods, Grandma's favorite. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rang. 3 weeks after the court victory, I stood in my living room, surrounded by sheets draped over furniture and memories thick as the dust in the air. Morning light streamed through the bay windows, catching motes that danced like tiny stars. The real estate agent's "for sale" sign lay discarded by the curb, a quiet reminder of how close I'd come to losing it all. "Rachel, where do you want these boxes?" Sarah, my college roommate turned volunteer, called from the hallway. She'd shown up at 7 a.m. sharp with coffee and determination. "Kitchen for now," I answered, running my hand along the familiar wallpaper. Grandma's favorite pattern, cream-colored with tiny blue forget-me-nots. It needed updating, but something in me couldn't bear to strip it yet. Remember when I was 6 and she taught me to count the flowers while she made chicken soup? 1 bunch for each year I'd been alive, she'd say. The doorbell chimed, pulling me from the memory. 2 more volunteers stood on the porch, paint swatches and measuring tapes in hand. Word had spread fast after the local paper ran a follow-up story about my plans for Edie's honor. The tutoring center was still just an idea, but somehow people got it. They understood what it meant to honor a grandmother's legacy. "The classroom space should go here," explained Marie, a retired teacher, gesturing at the formal dining room. "Natural light, plenty of room for desks." She'd been the first to email after the article, offering both expertise and elbow grease. I nodded, picturing Grandma's reaction. She'd taught elementary school for 30 years, believed education could open any door. How fitting that her house would keep teaching. By noon, the place hummed with activity. Someone had brought sandwiches. The living room furniture sat pushed against walls, drop cloths everywhere. The musty smell of disuse gave way to fresh paint and purpose. "Look who I found outside," Sarah called. Mrs. Keeley stood in the doorway, holding a cardboard flat of small plants. Her silver bob caught the light, and her eyes crinkled behind her glasses. "Rose cuttings," she explained, patting the leaves gently. "From Edie's garden. I've been nurturing them since, well, you know. They're ready for replanting now." My throat tightened. The garden had been Grandma's pride, especially her prized tea roses. Dad had let them wither after she passed. "Mrs. Keeley, I don't know what to say." She pressed the flat into my hands. "Edie always said gardens need patience and love, just like children." She glanced meaningfully at the math worksheets spread across the coffee table. "She'd be so proud, dear." We worked through the afternoon. The front bedroom became a study space, complete with donated bookshelves. The kitchen, where Grandma taught me to bake snickerdoodles, would serve after-school snacks. Every room held echoes of her that somehow made the changes feel right. Around 4, I climbed the stepladder to rehang the wind chimes. They'd been broken, Dad's doing, probably. But the local music shop had restrung them. Their gentle melody carried on the breeze, just like always. "Mail's here," Sarah called from below. I carefully descended, brushing dust from my jeans. Most of it was renovation-related. Contractor quotes, supply catalogs, a thank you note from Marie. But one envelope stood out, heavy cream paper, hand-addressed in familiar script. Mrs. Keeley appeared beside me, recognition flickering across her face. "Oh." She asked me to mail that once everything was settled. Said you'd know when the time was right. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper held Grandma's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then everything worked out as I hoped. The house is yours, and knowing you, you're already making it into something beautiful, something that matters. I'm sorry for all the secrecy, for not telling you about the will. But I knew your father. Knew he'd try to stop it if he caught wind too soon. You were always the strong one, quiet, yes, but strong where it counts. In your heart. The wind chimes are singing again, aren't they? Listen closely. They're playing your song. All my love, Grandma Edie." A drop fell on the paper. I hadn't realized I was crying until Mrs. Keeley pressed a tissue into my hand. Outside, the chimes tinkled softly, and somewhere upstairs, Sarah was humming while she painted. The house felt alive again, awake with possibility. The cream envelope trembled in my hands as I pulled out another letter, this one crisp and new, with a school district letterhead. I blinked, scanning the first few lines. Dear Ms. Whitlock, you may not remember me, but I was in your grandmother's third-grade class in 1982. The writer, Dr. Catherine Martinez, now ran an educational foundation. She'd seen the viral story about Edie's honor and recognized Grandma's name immediately. Memories flooded back to her, how Grandma had stayed late helping struggling students, bought supplies with her own money, believed in every child who crossed her threshold. Your grandmother changed my life, she wrote. She was the first person who told me I could be anything, even when my English wasn't perfect. Now I want to help her legacy grow. Our foundation would like to offer Edie's honor a $50,000 grant to expand your tutoring program. I had to sit down. The renovation crews had left hours ago, and evening light slanted through freshly washed windows. $50,000. We could add computers, hire part-time instructors, maybe even start a scholarship fund. My phone buzzed. Sarah sending photos from our first trial tutoring session earlier that day. 3 girls clustered around a math worksheet, faces intent. Another showed Marie explaining fractions using cookie pieces, just like Grandma used to do with me. The last one caught my breath. A student had drawn hearts around her completed assignment, writing, "Thank you, Edie's honor," in careful cursive. The house creaked gently, familiar sounds of settling. It felt different now, lighter somehow, despite the paint cans and drop cloths everywhere. Hope had moved back in, bringing purpose with it. I stepped outside into the spring evening. The rose garden misses Keeley helped restore was coming alive, tender shoots reaching towards sunset. The cuttings she'd saved were thriving, already dotted with tiny buds. Tea roses, just like Grandma loved. Coral pink, butter yellow, deep crimson. Even the thorny bushes that Dad let die had new growth at their bases. One spot remained empty, waiting for the final rose bush. I'd saved it for tonight after everyone left. The wind chimes tinkled softly overhead as I knelt in the cool earth, trowel in hand. Grandma taught me how to plant roses here, showing me the exact depth, the gentle way to spread the roots. Not too deep, her voice echoed in memory. They need room to grow. The soil was rich and dark between my fingers. I remembered countless afternoons watching her work this same garden, her small hands sure and steady. She'd hum while she pruned, tell stories while she weeded. Every rose had a name, a history, a special meaning. This last bush, a pure white variety called Peace, felt right for the empty space. As I tamped soil around its base, my phone buzzed again. More photos from Sarah, students' faces lit up with understanding, volunteers arranging tomorrow's lesson plans, Marie writing "Welcome to Edie's honor" on the newly installed whiteboard. The wind picked up slightly, setting the chimes dancing. Their sweet notes carried memories of summer afternoons on the porch, of Grandma's laugh, of belonging. She'd hung those chimes the day she bought the house, said their music made everything feel like home. I sat back on my heels, garden dirt on my jeans, and watched darkness soften the edges of the yard. The roses swayed gently, already looking like they'd always been there. Inside, books and supplies waited for tomorrow's students. Upstairs, fresh paint dried in cheerful colors. Every inch of the house breathed new life. Dad and Heather had tried to bury all this, the memories, the love, the possibility. They'd assumed my quiet nature meant weakness, that I'd accept their version of events without question. They never understood that silence can be strength, that watching and waiting require their own kind of courage. The chimes sang another gentle chorus as stars began appearing overhead. I brushed dirt from my hands and stood, surveying the garden one last time. The white rose would bloom soon, adding its voice to the symphony of color. Silence doesn't mean weakness, I whispered to the evening air, to Grandma's memory, to my own heart. It means I was watching. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.